Well, what a beautiful day it is here in Howth in Dublin today. It's now 2 degrees centigrade, pouring rain, icy and frosty. But sure, the sun shines in our hearts. I remember saying that in a secondary school staff room early in January when one of the teachers said it was a dreadful day. I said to her, and it was heard all around the staff room, never mind, I said, the sun shines in our hearts. I never realised secondary teachers could be violent until that moment, but it certainly did not go down well. Anyway, I digress. There has now been passed a law in the Oireachtas in relation to immigration into Ireland. Now, we must be sane and level-headed about what this actually implies. However, it's not in any way unsane or unlevel-headed to say that anybody who is looking objectively could say that our government is out to get us. I twigged that in 2012. If not before, but I twigged it definitely in 2012. A lot of people are still in denial about it. A lot of people are still frightened at the fact, yes, the government is your enemy. I don't mean like the old days when they were all out to line their own pockets and create powerful positions for themselves. I don't mean that. I mean there was a change when Fine Gael took over. It was coming anyway, really. But there was a mendacity, a positive mendacity off Fine Gael when they took over in 2011. I spotted it within a week. I won't say where I spotted it, that's another day's video. But people, Thomas Sheridan talks about normies and their fear of change. People are in denial still about the fact that our government, whatever about any other country, here in the Republic of Ireland, our government is out to get us. This does not surprise those of us who've been out here in the fringes watching for a long time. You just have to put two and two together and see what they're doing. Where you see the relevant stuff is not in the Oireachtas and certainly not in the mainstream media. You see it in court. You see it in the High Court where constitutional issues are argued about and where things are thrashed out. That very, very rarely gets into the papers, and when it does, more often than not, it's inaccurate. And they don't, the newspapers are the last people to tell you the nub of a case that's actually relevant. They'll give you all the irrelevant little details. They won't tell you what's happened in a High Court case that might have major constitutional implications. A lot of things have been happening in the High Court over the past 10 years that have major constitutional implications, but I won't bore you. Anyway, the Oireachtas passed a law in relation to immigration. And one of the constructions that people are putting on this is that effectively it opens the floodgates for droves of unvetted immigrants to come into Ireland and to be completely unchecked, and as soon as they walk in they get a free house and free money and all the rest of it. Whether that's true or not, and it's probably not true, it's probably, to put it mildly, a gross exaggeration. There is disquiet about a law that's been passed. And what this law has done is it has now said that any child born in Ireland is entitled to Irish citizenship. There was a referendum in 2004 in which that was, or at least we were told at the time, removed from our constitution. But then when you look at the amendment to the constitution that came in 2004, it actually has this little trapdoor in it that says except by law. Well, then that means that they can pass this. So anybody who's thinking that there's going to be a constitutional challenge standable against the law that's passed the Oireachtas will be disappointed and may lose a lot of money in the process. So you must remember that they've worked a lot of these things out. This then reflects upon the statutory instrument in reference to masks, in which it said that anybody who wishes to claim an exemption from extreme distress, how do you define extreme distress? And then, difficulty breathing, shall not be forced to wear a mask anywhere. It doesn't say that there's a burden of proof on the person. It doesn't say that they have to have medical records. So that means that they have to be taken at their word. So, when they drafted that, they did that deliberately. And when they drafted that referendum in 2004, they did that deliberately. And when they drafted the law that has now passed the Oireachtas, they did that deliberately. So they do their homework here. Getting back to the masks, one of the reasons why they drafted it that way was really because they didn't want any substantial legal challenges to come. Any lawyer could look at the mask law and say that's unenforceable. They'd say, in 2 seconds they'd say that it's unenforceable. And they knew this, and they knew that anybody with any sense would read between the lines. And I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a qualified lawyer. I read the law. I read the whole thing, and I said, that's unenforceable. It's valid law insofar as, statutory instruments stand, in the eyes of the law in this country. But then you have to read into the details. So we don't know exactly, or we're not entirely clear about what has just passed the Oireachtas in relation to immigration. It's not really relevant. The problem is the NGOs. That is the problem. I was watching a film, Gangs of New York, in which droves of Irish immigrants arrived in New York off the boat, many of them starving, many had died on the way. They were in dire circumstances coming out of Ireland, coming from the famine. Many of them walked onto boats just off the quays in the west of Ireland. It was tragic. It was horrific what happened in the famine. When they arrived in New York, they were on their own, except when they were drafted for the Union Army. Apart from that, they were on their own. They had to make their own way in the United States. And the Irish community, particularly in the east coast of the United States, lived in dire poverty and criminality and squalor for many, many decades. Everybody in America now we love the Irish. Colleen and my daughters Kerry and Shannon, they're Irish as well. Oh, we're all Irish. And you'd say to them, well, when have you visited Ireland? Oh, never. But I'm Irish in my heart. Yeah, that's like the sun shining in my heart back in January in a secondary school. Yeah, but Irish now, the Irish in America and the United States are considered, an elite group and a very, very special group. When Ellen DeGeneres isn't jeering Saoirse Ronan over the pronunciation of her forename. But that's Democrats for you. The Republicans are actually genuinely respectful to the Irish, and they always have been. It's the Democrats who have the condescending attitude. But sure, that's the Democrats, isn't it? They have a condescending attitude to everyone. The Irish would walk off the boats into the US, and they were on their own. They defend for themselves. What we have in Ireland now is we have people coming into this country. How many we have coming in, I can't be sure about. The nature of the people coming in, I can't be sure about. But what happens when they walk off the boats here, whatever about being given free houses and money, and I make no comment in that regard, immediately they're met by highly, highly, highly paid representatives of NGOs who tell them that everybody in Ireland is racist and that the first thing they have to do is start moaning. These people who come into this country may not have very good English. Some of them do, some of them don't. They're greeted by somebody plausible from an NGO telling them that if they want to get ahead here, what they have to do is moan, 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 moan and insult the Irish people. So these vulnerable people who step off the boats or the planes into Ireland, they're met by these NGO people who are telling them, look, to get ahead here, you have to call everybody racist. You have to say, you want everybody to adopt to your cultures and traditions. Whereas the Irish, like the idea of the Irish arriving in New York and then saying, well, now we expect everybody to adopt to us. I know they'd have been walked off the pier. They'd have been sent back onto the boats in New York if they tried that carry on. But no, what's happening now is that the NGOs here, which we are paying for with our taxes, always remember that, we are paying for the NGOs with our taxes. We are paying elite insiders to insult us and to foment social unrest. That's what the NGOs are doing. A new NGO has started up called Kayla. Kayla, that's what they're called, Kayla. What a lovely, touchy-feely, warm type of name. Kayla. What's interesting to look at with Kayla is they're talking about inclusion and, diversity, not division. And they have Palestinian flags on it and people in hijabs. Now, I wonder how inclusive and non-divisionary they are regarding Jews. But you see, that's the Irish left for you, which, the NGO lobby is absolutely like lips and teeth to the Irish left. They're all the same insiders who circulate between all these groups. They do it because they're left. They do it because up to now not enough people have woken up in the proper sense. Have woken up to what's going on with the NGO lobby. The NGO lobby is, from my evaluation, my subjective personal evaluation, the biggest racket in this state. I would go as far as to call it criminal, although you'll find there's no law against what they do. But absolutely the NGOs are the biggest racket in this state. The NGOs fall into a number of categories, but what we mean these days when we refer to NGOs loosely is professional charities. So one person put on Twitter recently, he dealt with an NGO, and they all made it sound like they were doing him a great favour by talking to him on the phone. Yes, that's right. That's what NGOs are like to deal with. These people are highly, highly paid for what they do, in permanent, pensionable jobs with all the perks, holiday pay and all the rest of it. And when you deal with them, they act like they're, like they're saints working in charities. Well, here's something about the NGOs and all of these people who are talking about diversity and enrichment and the need, to keep reminding the Irish people of how terribly evil and racist we all are. How many of these people in the NGOs would do what they're doing for free? So if the money was cut from the NGOs, 5 billion a year of taxpayers' money goes into these seditious organisations. And they are seditious. We are paying 5 billion a year, 5,000 million a year, to organisations that undermine our social fabric. Now, if they stopped, if the gravy train ended, if the tap was turned off, the tap of taxes, people's taxes was turned off, the NGO lobby, would they continue to do this? That remains to be seen. The first thing we need to do is to turn the tap off.